Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my Sims 4 speedrunning video, or welcome to the channel if you are new here. So in today's video I'm going to be building in the brand new world of Chestnut Bridge, which is the latest world that we got for the Sims 4. It came in the latest expansion pack, which only came out a couple of days ago, the Sims 4 Horse Ranch EP, and I'm going to be building a huge, and I mean really big, family horse ranch. So this house ends up having 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and it's built on a 50 by 50 lot. Now, of course, we just got a new expansion pack for The Sims 4, which is the Sims 4 Horse Ranch EP. For future reference, the expansion pack came out on Thursday evening for me. It came out at 6, even though I didn't actually get my house in the pack until like 10 PM at night, but that is just due to my internet upload speed. But the pack came out like Thursday evening or Thursday, depending on where you are in the world. And yeah, I'm doing this voiceover on Saturday. So I've only had my hands in the pack for a few days, but so far, so very good. Like, let me tell you, like, this expansion pack has just met my expectations and then just smashed it out the park. So of course, naturally, the first thing that I did once I got my hands on the expansion pack was just basically come in, jump straight into an empty lot and basically just had a little browse at all the new content that we got from this DLC. I am so happy with all the new build and buy stuff from the Horse Ranch expansion pack. I'm not even just saying this because it's new fresh content. I genuinely think it might be some of the best build and buy that we've got from any DLC ever. It is so good, and the thing is, I don't even know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting it to be this good, if that makes any sense. It is just the wooden textures on this furniture that we got in this game and all the wallpapers is just so absolutely just stunningly beautiful. Can't even describe it. The new objects that we've got, the swatches on them, just even like the meshes of them, they just look so good. I'm just so happy with all the build and buy stuff in this pack alone. And then I've done a little tiny bit of gameplay. I haven't properly dived into the actual proper full-on gameplay, but for the little bit of gameplay that I have done, I have been really having a lot of fun with this expansion pack. And yeah, I wanted to do a build pretty much just showcasing everything we got within this new DLC and put it all into one. And so yeah, I am absolutely just in love with this build, so I really hope you guys like it as well. But anyway, moving on from that and actually getting on and talking about what I'm doing right now. So you can see that I've already come in and pretty much just already done the shell of the house. I'm already moving on and just start playing about with some window placements and stuff like that. But the actual main structure and the main body of the house is pretty much already done. One thing that I did want to mention and kind of speak about is coming into this build, I was in 2 minds, because one part of me was like, build something massive, build something with all the new content in it, just basically build almost like a show home for this new DLC, and just basically a show home showing all the new items, all the new gameplay features, all the new furniture. That was me on one hand. But then on the other hand, I was thinking, well, when I think of ranches and when I think of like a Western horse ranch, normally they seem to be like 1-story houses. And so coming into this build, originally in my mind, I was thinking that I wasn't going to make it to be a 2-story build, but as soon as I started recording, that went out the window and it ended up being an absolutely massive house. But this way, I was able to fit all the new content in the house somewhere. So the actual house itself, like I've mentioned, it ends up having 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. There is also a kitchen with like a little dining table in there. Then there is also like a separate dining room, a lounge room. Then we also have a utility room and then a double garage, which that's just like on the actual inside of the house itself. We do also end up having like a little separate, do you just call it a ranch, like a horse ranch? You know, where the horses will live. There is a separate building for them. I didn't want to attach them to the house because something in my mind, it felt weird if I would have had like the actual horse's house within my Sims house. Does that make any sense? But there ends up being a double garage, and within the double garage, we've got one of my new favourite gameplay objects. I'm not joking. Your Sims can now make wine. Of course, I had to place it down to the field somewhere. Now, one thing about me, and if you maybe watched my content before, or you've maybe like caught up on a few videos here and there, you might have heard me talk about the nectar making in The Sims 3, because I have literally said about this for years, that I really wish that we could make wine or like make nectar in The Sims 4, because it was something that we could do in The Sims 3 from the World Adventures expansion pack, and I had so much fun doing it when I was a kid. And I've said for literal years how much I would love something like that in The Sims 4. Guess what? we've got it in The Sims 4. I'm so excited. Honestly, I'm not joking. I'm probably just as excited about the nectar making as what I am about the horses. I know to a lot of people, it probably doesn't even seem like that much of a big deal, but the amount of houses that I've built just in the past that I've said, oh, I'd love if I'd be able to have like a little like nectar making station, or the amount of different houses that I've built to have wine cellars that aren't actually wine cellars, but I kind of play pretend in my head because I wish we had something like that in The Sims 4. And now we've actually got the ability within The Sims 4 Horse Ranch expansion pack for your Sims to physically make wine. Like your Sims will literally go into a bucket and stomp on some like grapes or apples or whatever they fancy, and your Sims can now make a bottle of nectar. I'm just so excited about it. But yeah, I end up placing it down into the double garage on the inside of this house, and then on the outside of the house that ends up being, I'm just gonna call it and refer to it as the horse's house, because I feel like saying a horse ranch or the horse's ranch might be wrong. I don't know, but I feel like horse's house is just, you understand what I mean, it's where the horses live. But there ends up being one horse house on the exterior of this build, and on the inside you can fit 2 horses within the barn itself. Now, something which I'm so appreciative of with this expansion pack, you can physically just place down the horses wherever you fancy. Like, the thing is, if you think back to other expansion packs like the Cottage Living DLC, you have like cows and you have llamas, but they're kind of tied to an animal shed. I'm not sure if you're familiar. With this expansion pack, I'm so grateful that they went a completely different route and they didn't make us like have this one like certain looking object that the horses are tied to. It's pretty much just like a hay bed. You can place it down anywhere. You can place it down in like your kitchen if you fancy. Like you have no restrictions, from what I've seen anyway, where you can place it down. I'm just so happy with this just one small little detail, because it opens up so many different possibilities for builds. Because if you think about it, whenever you're trying to build a farm in The Sims 4, it can be very tricky if you're trying to build a farm that's not in like a cottagey kind of style, because previously we've got like cows and llamas tied to an animal shed that comes in one certain type of architecture. It can be really hard to like fit into, say for example, a Japanese farm or something like that, and you've got to try and find workarounds. But yeah, with the horses expansion pack, they just gave us pretty much a hay bed. You can plonk it wherever you want, and I'm so grateful that they did that. But yeah, in the horses house there ends up being 2 of them, so you can house 2 horses. There also ends up being like their little hay barrels and their watering station. There's also like a few different toys dotted about outside there. Is it called a paddock? I ain't got a clue. I think it's called a paddock. It sounds right. I feel like I should be calling it a paddock. But basically the horses have got a front garden outside of their little house. It pretty much ends up having the exact same items in their little garden as what it does on the inside of their house, but the only difference is there's no hay bed outside. I decided to put the hay beds inside. Of course you could probably add some outside, but then there won't be any shelter for them, and then I'd feel really bad if I put a horse down and then it starts like chucking it down in rain or something. But there is enough space to add more hay beds if you fancy. But yeah, there ends up being a few more different like hay stations, watering stations, bouncy balls. Also end up placing down a little chicken coop into the horse's front garden as well, which I don't know if that's realistically a good choice or not. I don't know. In real life, I'm not sure if chickens and horses get on. Do you know what I mean? I'm not a horsey person. In real life, I have no idea how them 2 animals interact with each other. But in The Sims, I feel like they should probably be alright. So there is like a little chicken coop in the kind of like the horse's front garden, the horse's paddock. I basically, when I was building this house, I was thinking, well, me personally, when it comes around to exploring the gameplay and exploring this expansion pack, what kind of things would I want to play with? What kind of things would I want to do if my Sims do just happen to live on a ranch? And one of the things was, okay, well, obviously I want there to be horses, but then I want there to be other kind of animals as well. And so I thought, oh, a chicken coop, that's a little perfect small object. It kind of fits into ranch life and maybe like some sustainable living. There also ends up being a vegetable patch as well in this lot. You can see it just kind of on the right hand side of the animal's house, or like the horse's house. There ends up being plenty of planters for your Sims to grow all their own like fruits and vegetables and herbs and stuff. And then in terms of the horses, there also ends up being kind of like a practice run. I'm going to term it as a practice run. I think that is the correct way to say it, but basically your Sims on their horses, they can do all these different jumps, they can walk around barrels and all these different things in this new expansion pack. And I just wanted to include one somewhere in this house where it is one of the biggest lots, not only in the world but also in the game. I wanted to make sure to include one of them kind of interactable things for horses, and so yeah, I just place it down on the right hand side. I kind of built this house in a bit of a puzzle way to start off with, which basically what I did is I built the actual structure of the house, and then once I got the structure down, I was happy with it, and I did the windows and the doors and, you know, all the bits and bobs like that. I then started figuring out, okay, well, how is the actual outside of the house going to look? Like, how is the garden going to look? Is there going to be enough space to have a vegetable patch? Is there going to be enough space to do this and do that, and so on and so forth? So to kind of like start off, and kind of like the first like few minutes, I basically plonked down some fences and tried to fence off different areas. And then once I was happy with all the different placements for like the horse's house, the vegetable patch, the practice run, once I was happy with the placements for it, that's when I come in and start decorating them. I was just basically placing them down as kind of like a reference for my future self when it comes around to actually furnishing them, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But you can see that I'm currently just going around and just doing some terrain painting. Now, let me tell you, the terrain painting on this one lot alone was such a process. I must have spent probably about 45 minutes just figuring out what terrain paint colour I wanted to use, because I was so indecisive on the overall look of the terrain. Because the thing is, where I'm building this section of the world of Chestnut Ridge, it's kind of like a desert. There's a lot of sand. There's literally a cliff next to the house. I mean, you can just about see the cliff, but there is a lot of terrain that I'm not too familiar with when it comes around to building, and so I didn't know what kind of terrain paint colour I wanted to go for. So you would have seen I basically went through phases of picking the terrain paint, picking the colour, putting the colour all over on the floor, and then I decided to change my mind. But that process happened about 3 times. So originally, when I started off by doing the terrain paint, I basically plonked down some mud. We got a new mud terrain from the new expansion pack. I used that on the majority of the lot, kind of mapped out as kind of like a little bit of a guide for myself. Okay, I want terrain paint in these different areas, but then I didn't like the look of the mud. So then I placed down at this base game terrain paint, which is kind of like these little tiny pebbles, and it's ever so slightly got these tiny little bits of grass in them. I placed that over the top of the mud, but then with placing down this pathway on top of a mud, it made the path so much darker than what it originally is. But I'd already mapped out the way that I wanted the terrain paint to look, so then I ended up combining another terrain paint, which is one from the the Get Together expansion pack. It's kind of like this really light terrain path. I then placed down that on top of the base game one. You can still see the base game one in some like smaller increments, but then this way it was kind of like a little bit of a happy accident, but it made it look a little bit more dimensional. Because sometimes I find when I place down terrain paint in the game, it can just look very flat. It doesn't look like it's got much depth to it if you're just using this one terrain paint all over on, especially like a massive lot like this one. And so with having like different layers of the terrain paint, it just kind of made it look a little bit more 3D, and I'm really happy with the terrain paint in the end. But yeah, it definitely went through its processes of actually getting it to this point, because I was just so indecisive of what colour I wanted it to be, what shape I wanted it to be. I also ended up placing down some mud in like some certain sections to make it look like cars and trucks have drove on the pathway. They've got like mud or dirt on their tyres, and they've kind of like brought it into the actual lot itself. So I placed down some like mud terrain in kind of like a circle motion around the wishing well in the centre, and then I kind of led that to the garages around the side. I really do like it, but yeah, like I said, it was definitely a process for this one. But you can see that I've now moved on and I've started going around and just doing the landscaping for this build. Now, I feel like it's very important to note this out, because you've probably noticed it. If not, you're probably going to notice it now. But if you were to look at my catalogue right now, I'm very much aware that it looks like an absolute massive just mumbo jumbo of stuff. The UI is completely broken and everything's just not in its correct place. It's a big mess, to say the least. I want to clarify that this is not a part of the Horse Ranch expansion pack. Like, don't worry, you're not going to download the new EP and this is going to happen to you. Basically, when I was building this, I re-added a mod that was outdated with the broken UI back into my game, which I did on purpose, but it was just so I could do some landscaping, which sounds very backwards, I'm very much aware. But basically, I'm someone that uses the Better Build Buy mod by Twisted Mexi. I swear by this mod. It is my absolute #1 favourite mod of all time. And when I do not have it in my game, I can't function properly. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, the mod itself is such a key part of building to me now. I physically struggle to build without it. But when I was building this, it was probably around about 3 AM, 4 AM on a Friday morning, and the Better Build Buy mod was yet to be updated. But what happens is when you have mods in your game that are broken and you get such a huge patch update like the one that we just got, it does end up breaking UI mods and just mods in general. But I basically cannot build without the Better Build Buy mod, and so I basically decided I know I can't see the menu that properly right now, but I feel pretty confident in my knowledge of remembering everything in the menu and where it's meant to be. And so basically, even though the mod was broken, I added the mod back into my game so I could freely place down live edit and debug menu items when I was landscaping this build. Also want to know that don't worry, it's not going to stay like this throughout the rest of the build. This was pretty much just when I was doing the exterior, because once I had basically got the lot to a point where I was happy with all the placement of things, I left out enough guides for myself for like the landscaping, I knew where everything was going to go. I then decided to exit my game, re-add in this broken mod, which sounds really backwards, I know, I'm very much aware of it, but I re-added it back in because I'm someone that I really struggle to landscape without the live edit and the debug plants in the game, because although we do have some really nice bushes and trees and just general like shrubs in the normal build and buy for the game and not like the debug ones, I now am so used and just so prone to the more detailed ones that we've got from the live edit menu that whenever I place down a shrub that isn't as detailed, I just look at it and I think, it's not really as good, is it? And so I just basically added in a broken mod into my game just so I could place down a few different trees and a few different shrubs. But it was alright. I didn't really run into any problems. One problem that I did run into, which I actually managed to find a workaround, is I just couldn't find the flooring, because if you was to look, I know currently I'm just placing down some lanterns, but if you was to look at my build catalogue where you normally find like the wallpaper and the flooring and stuff, the flooring option completely disappeared. Don't know where she went, like she's just completely disappeared. But I managed to find a workaround, which was I just used the little like eyedropper tool onto the flooring and then it brought up the menu anyway. But in terms of actually placing down the landscaping, yeah, I pretty much just added in the Better Build Buy mod so then I could have access to all the different live edit plants and trees and just shrubs in the world, and then I wouldn't have to be really restricted into just using the handful of ones that we've got from like the normal game. Because the thing is as well, when I was building this house, I did want to build it for my save file, and this is going to be my save file, and I knew if I was to use like the normal plants and stuff and I was to fully do it, I knew that I would probably end up loving it as well, but I wouldn't have loved it as much because I couldn't go into that much detail, and not even just for like landscaping purposes, but for other purposes like live edit sacks of potatoes and live edit like watering cans and like little tiny details like that, like little tiny grass clumps, little bits and bobs like that. Them tiny little details is one of the things I enjoy most about building in The Sims 4, and when I don't have access to them, I feel like I've just lost my arm, and so I needed to have them in my game. And yeah, the menu doesn't stay like this throughout the rest of the build, don't worry. As soon as I move on into the inside of the house, I remove it because I no longer needed it. But yeah, if you're wondering what is happening with my UI, like I said, don't be scared. It is not the expansion pack, it is me. It was a me problem. I did it to myself, but it was worth it, because then that way I could just freely landscape and freely place down live edit menu items and debug menu items and not have to search through a massive catalogue of things just named debug. Hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, moving on from that, as you can see, I'm just going around and placing down a few different like little rocks that we got from the new expansion pack, placing down a few different like shrubs here and there. Something that you might notice is I keep on pulling out brooms from my library. Now, I want you to explain this because it's actually a really handy trick. So going back to the Better Build Buy mod, I promise it is relevant, but with this mod, I added it back in and it was outdated. One, because it completely messed up the UI of my game. You know, you can see the absolute kerfuffle that is on my screen right now on the bottom left-hand side. It's just, there is like park benches in the roof. There is like chairs randomly next to a fountain. Like, it's just all a bit skew-whiff. But in the process of re-adding the Better Build Buy mod back into my catalogue, it has the older packs that aren't new DLCs attached to it, but it hadn't been updated for all the new content that we've got from in the Horse Ranch expansion pack. So every single expansion pack or every single DLC that we've got in The Sims 4, it has certain like debug items, it has certain like live edit items. For example, if you think about Realm of Magic, you can find like all the different brooms and all the different wands and all the different familiars within the debug menu for that game pack. But where I was playing it with an outdated version of the mod hadn't been updated to categorize all the new live edit and all the new debug items from the Horse Ranch expansion pack. And so basically I did my little trick, which I have done this a good few times before, but basically before I came in and I started recording, I basically just went through the debug menu in the live edit menu without the Better Build Buy mod installed into my game, so it was all uncategorized, it was all a little bit like all over the place basically. But what I did is I went through the debug and the live edit menu, I filtered by the Horse Ranch expansion pack, so then I could see all the new content that comes behind these cheats. I then basically found all the different items that I thought I might want to use in this build, and I plonked them into little rooms. I then saved the rooms to my library, and then I basically had access to them even if I didn't have the cheat installed into my game or I hadn't activated the cheat. Now, like I said, I've done this before. I did this with, you know, the Cottage Living expansion pack. When that first came out, I did it then, and I actually uploaded these saved rooms onto my gallery. So if you ever want some like Cottage Living live edit stuff or debug stuff, maybe you're someone that plays on console or something, I have uploaded these previously onto my gallery. But yeah, I basically just created these little rooms for myself for when it came around to actually recording, that had like different shrubs in, and then some had all the different like new trucks that we got, some had like horsey related stuff, so then we have like, you know, like a little horse broom and like just little bits and bobs. So basically stuff that would have come in the debug menu and the live edit menu from the Horse Ranch expansion pack, but I just basically categorized them into different rooms, saved them to my library, and then exited the game. So then the cheat kind of like disappeared. But then once I go back into my game, even though I hadn't turned on the show hidden objects cheat or the show live edit objects cheat, where I'd saved all of them items into a room in my library, I still had access to them. I can't even like begin to tell you how useful it would be, even in like situations like this. Like I was still using the normal kind of like live edit menu and the normal debug menu, so I still had access to, say for example, you know, the Get Together expansion pack. I still had access to all that live edit menu, but where I'd created all these little different separate rooms with all these like horsey bits and bobs, I then had access to them as well, and they were kind of semi-categorized. Honestly, it's super handy, and it really does help when it comes around to doing builds like this where you haven't got access to mods like the Better Build Buyer. If you are interested, let me know and I can upload my little rooms that I've created onto the gallery. Like I said, I've done it previously before for the Cottage Living expansion pack. I created rooms that have like fences in, and some of them have like sheds. I used a shed in this build, I don't know if you noticed it. It was by the right hand back side of the lot, you know, where I placed down like them garage doors and I placed down some trucks in front of it. Well, I found like a debug shed within the Horse Ranch expansion pack. I think it's a live edit menu. I plonked that down, I saved it to my room previously, and then when I was looking for like different objects and decorations to kind of like furnish and just decorate the exterior, it really came in handy. But yeah, let me know if you are interested in me uploading like my little saved rooms. I might, once I actually get the Better Build Buyer mod, once it's updated and I've got it in my game, which I think it is now actually been updated, but if you want to, I can create some more customizable, a little bit more like better rooms. The rooms that I created were very slapdash, you know, I only had a handful of different objects to work with, but they really did come handy when it came around to doing this build. Like one example, you'll see it when I was doing the landscaping, I kept on pulling this little room out that had these kind of little tiny red flowers in them because I used them all over this building landscaping. You can see that I've kind of like moved over to the back porch of the house, but you can see them little tiny red flowers. I pulled them out from one of my little saved rooms. Honestly, it's super handy, and if there's one thing that I can recommend when doing like a build like this and you want to use so many different live edit objects, and maybe you're someone that plays on console, or maybe you're someone that doesn't like to play with mods that often, try just making these little rooms and you'll feature yourself. Honestly, they will thank you for it. But anyway, moving on from that and actually getting back and talking about what I'm doing right now. So you can see that I've pretty much finished up the majority of the front garden. I'm shortly going to move over and start furnishing the inside of the little like horse's house, but you would quickly just see me do like the back porch area. So on the back porch itself, I ended up placing down a few different like little seating areas. We've got one that's kind of like a little bench, it's got some cushions on it. Also got like a little tea set, so your Sims can go out there and like brew a cup of tea, and then they can sit on the little sofa and just like look out onto the view. I purposely didn't fence in the whole entire back garden because where I'm building is quite a secluded area, and I didn't want to have like a really big fence like covering kind of like the natural landscape around it, because if your Sims live here, they haven't got a direct neighbour like next door. Like if they can come downstairs in like a towel and it'll be alright, like no one's going to see them. And so I didn't want to like fully fence in the whole entire house. And so yeah, your Sims can like sit on the little sofa and drink a cup of tea. There is also like a little chess table out there, a few different planters, a few new rocking chairs, which the rocking chairs that we've got in this pack are so adorable. I can't even put it into words, because the thing is, we've had rocking chairs previously from different DLCs in The Sims 4. but they haven't been the rocking chair that I've always pictured in my mind. Because me personally, when I think of a rocking chair, I'm thinking of a really classic old little rustic wooden rocking chair, you know, maybe have like a pillow or a blanket on it or something like that. Previously, we've got 2 different versions of a rocking chair, or like 2 different DLCs that gave us rocking chairs in the game. We first got introduced to a rocking chair from the Nifty Knitting Stuff Pack, and we got 4 versions of a rocking chair. Pretty much all the same thing, but like one of them's got a pillow on it, and then there's a version that's got arms, and there's a version that hasn't got arms. Well, basically, the colour swatches on these Nifty Knitting rocking chairs aren't exactly my preference. They're not my cup of tea. They're very, you know, the orangey wood that the Sims team went through a proper phase of loving in the Sims 4. They're very much associated with that like orangey wood. I think there's like a white, a black, and then like bright colours as well. Normally when I place them down into my builds, I'm not gonna sway towards like the bright orangey wood. Then we got introduced to some more rocking chairs from the Growing Together expansion pack, which I do also still really like, but they're a little bit more like softer rocking chairs. They're ones that you can place down into like your front room. They're a little bit more like comfy looking. They look like they've got some sort of like cushion or like some sort of like soft furniture. We haven't had a classic rocking chair. With the new expansion pack, we got 2 new versions of a rocking chair, and I used the version that's got this tiny little pillow on it, and it's honestly so adorable. Also, before I move on and I'll start talking about what I'm doing right now, I painted the ceiling on the porch, and it was my first time painting a ceiling in the game, because if you're not aware, Tuesday of this week, so basically a few days ago, we got an update to The Sims 4. We can now paint ceilings. I honestly, right, at first I was like, it's not going to be that game changing. No, it's very game changing, honestly. The screenshots for this house just bring me so much pure happiness and excitement, because I no longer have this like off-white kind of grey ceiling ruining my screenshots. The screenshots of this house are just so pretty, and what makes it is the fact that we can now paint ceilings. But I started by painting the ceilings on that little porch area, and it just made me so happy. I was just beaming once I painted the ceiling, and then I could see that the ceiling and then the walls and then the floor, it all kind of like combined into one, and it just looks so cool. And I'm so happy we've now got this feature in the game. I honestly didn't think it would be as game changing as what it actually ends up being, but like think of all the different possibilities. Think about like when you paint like a nightclub, when you build a nightclub in the game, sometimes you have like really dark walls in a nightclub, because I mean you're not going to have like bright pink walls in a nightclub, and I mean you might do, but I mean I've never personally been in one like that. But if you was to go and you was to build something like that, and then you take screenshots of it, a lot of the time you've just got like a really just off-whitey grey ceiling just ruining your screenshots. And now you can paint the ceilings whatever colour you fancy, whatever colour that you've got in your flooring, you can paint, and it's just, it made me so happy. But anyway, besides the point, as you would have seen, I just quickly did the little horse ranch inside area. Honestly, didn't really know how to furnish it, because I've never been in like a stable. That's the word that I was looking for, stable. Well, anyway, the horse's stable. I quickly decorated it. I placed down some like tears onto the wall, some little scratches, little bumps here and there. Also placed down a bunch of different like hay onto the floor. And now, as you can see, I've now moved on into the inside of this house. Quickly just did like the little entrance hallway, but I've moved over and I've started furnishing the kitchen. I can't even begin to express how much I just love this kitchen. It is probably one of my favourite kitchens I've ever done. I know I've said that before in the past, but this tops it. This is, I know it seems so simple, but there is just something about this kitchen that just brings me so much happiness and just fills me with so much excitement. And the screenshots as well for the kitchen, they're just so pretty. Like the screenshots of this house, just, you know, I'm just obsessed with, mainly because we now have painted ceilings and you can really get the kind of like westerny feel that I was trying to go for. But the kitchen, I love the new counters. I just love all the new like decorative pieces that we've got. I don't know if you've seen it, but in this new like Horse Ranch DLC, we've got like this wall decoration which ends up having like pots and pans kind of like hanging off it. We've finally got like a new updated version of it, because previously we'd only really had one item like that in the game, and it was an object that is from base game. But now we've got one from the Horse Ranch expansion pack, and where it's from a newer DLC, or it's like not from the base game, it's so much more detailed, and just like the mesh of the item just looks so nice. I haven't placed it down into the kitchen yet, but I will get around to placing it down in a little while. But then also in terms of like the kitchen clutter, we've got like random little pots with like spatulas and spoons and stuff. We've also got individual plates now, which you can stack as high as you want. And then we've also got these little kind of like, I can't think of the word that they're called, but like iron pots. I know they've got a name, but I can't think of what they're called. But we've got some of them in the game, and you would have seen I basically placed one down, and then I basically, when back into gameplay mode because I have the tool mod installed as I'm doing this, but where I don't have the Better Build Buy mod installed as I've moved on into the furnishing, I couldn't access tool in build buy mode. And so in live edit mode, I basically got another one of these little like metal iron pots, and I rotated it and I made it a little bit smaller so it looks like these pots are being stacked upon each other. Also got some really new beautiful like flower plant decorations. I placed them down next to the little pots that I was talking about, but I am so obsessed with the plants in this pack. They're just so pretty. You know, like a water pitcher that you'd normally like pour water from, like an iron one. We've got some of them, but then they made them into plant pots, and then some of them have like lavender coming out of them. Some of them have like some sort of like blossoms. We have bigger ones, smaller ones. I'm just absolutely just obsessed and so in love with the new plants that we've got in this new pack that I think I'm probably going to use them in every single build going forward. And if you didn't manage to catch it when I placed them down into the kitchen, don't worry, because I definitely placed them down a few more times in this house. I was so obsessed with them. But if you didn't manage to catch it, I mean, I've got one on the table in the kitchen. You can just about see it on the left hand side. But if you didn't manage to catch it, don't worry, because I'm going to end up placing them down throughout the whole entire house. I was just so obsessed with these new plants. They're just so pretty. But we've got so many new objects that I'm just so happy with in this DLC. And like I said at the start of this video, I truly do think this is probably like one of the best build and buy catalogs that you've got from any DLC ever, just because the quality of the objects and the swatches of the objects. One, the swatches make it so usable. You can use these in so many different scenarios, so many different interiors, and in just so many different types of builds. I know that I'm definitely going to get my use out of this pack, just because for starters, the catalogue itself is absolutely colossal. There is so many different objects in the pack itself, like the actual build buy items. There is so many, I can't even count. But not only that, just like the quality and the mesh of them, it's just so pretty, and I'm absolutely in love, and I'm just in absolute awe, if anything, from this whole entire pack. But also in the kitchen, if you would have seen, I did also place down one of the new dining room tables that we got from the DLC. The one that I placed down is the little round one, and then I placed down one set of the chairs. So in the kitchen, I was trying to make it feel like it's kind of like the breakfast room as well. It's kind of like the breakfast table. So I was picturing your Sims be able to, you know, eat their breakfast there, maybe like have a bite of lunch or something. But when they have like their fancy dinners, or like they sit down of an evening as a family, if that does ever happen in your game, can never get my Sims to actually do that, but if it does happen in your game, I imagine that there is a more like formal dining room, which we'll move on to shortly, that has some more leery chairs, and you'll see what I mean, move on to it. But I'm absolutely obsessed with them. But currently you can see them just going around and just furnishing the inside of the lounge room. So going back to the quality of the items, the quality of these chairs, I can't get over. Like the sofas and the armchairs, they're just so good, and they come in so many lovely swatches. I had such a hard time trying to pick and trying to decide what swatch of the sofa to go for. I think I ended up settling on maybe just like the default swatch of the sofa, but I think why I love this pack's build and buy catalogue so much, and just why I'm just gushing over this whole entire pack in general, is because, you know, normally with a lot of different DLCs in The Sims 4, we get a lot of different furniture swatch options. We've got a lot of different colour ranges. But I'm not going to lie to you, half the time I don't even touch half the swatches, because the amount of times we've got some really lovely sofas, but they come in like bright orange or bright blue, or just like a really bizarre colour that doesn't match the interior of the house that I want to decorate. I feel like a lot of swatches from a lot of different items from loads of different DLCs are very particular swatches I feel like you would use in particular kind of settings, whereas the Horse Ranch build and buy catalogue, there is so many neutrals. I want to cry, and it makes me so happy, and that's just why I'm so obsessed with it. But you can see it in the lounge room. I also placed down the new fireplace. I kind of like pre-placed it down because when I was coming in and I was figuring out like the wallpaper and the flooring, I just wanted to see if it matched with like the chimney on the exterior, because I always try and like to see if I can line up my fireplaces on the interior with the exterior chimney, and it pretty much lined up perfectly, which I was really happy about. But yeah, I pre-placed that down before I moved on into it. Also in the lounge room, we've got a new standing piano, which the standing piano, for starters, it's really chunky. Don't get me wrong, love it, but it's very chunky. Like, I had a bit of a task trying to clutter up the top of it, because I wanted it to feel very lived in this house. I wanted it to feel like Sims have been living here for some duration of time and they haven't just moved in. Like, I wanted there to be little small realistic touches here and there. But yeah, we've got a new standing piano. Again, it comes in some really nice swatches, which I'm just so grateful for. But now, as you can see, I've now moved over into the more formal dining room, and this is where I use some quite leery chairs. Now, I feel like these chairs are very much going to be a Marmite situation. Now, what I mean by a Marmite situation is I feel like you're either going to love these chairs and you're going to be as obsessed with them as maybe what I am, or you're not going to like them and you're going to think they're quite ugly. I personally think they're just so beautiful and just so unique, and I was so excited when I saw these in the catalogue for the first time. Honestly, I nearly jumped off my chair because I can't believe we've got something like this in The Sims 4. Don't get me wrong, it's not the first time they've introduced animal print into the game. We have a lot of different animal print of different items in the game, like beds and sofas and stuff from different DLCs, but the animal print that we've already got in the game is the one that we got from the Get Famous expansion pack, and it's an animal print which I'm not particularly fond of. It's like pink and black cheetah print, or you know, just like tiger print in like bizarre colours. Like, love the animal print, not a fan of the colour swatches, but the swatches of them dining room chairs, they're so good, and there's so many different options as well. I really didn't know which one to go for, but in the end I went through a kind of like a brownie and like a black kind of swatch on the actual cow print pattern itself. Now, we do have 2 new dining room tables. Like I said, I used one in the kitchen as kind of like a little breakfast table, but then we also do have one 3-tile long table as well, which I don't dislike it, but I found it quite hard to try and match along with the chairs that I wanted to use, and so I didn't end up using it. I ended up using the one that we got from the Jungle Adventure game pack. I was debating using the one that we got from My Wedding Stories, because the one that we got from the My Wedding Stories game pack has kind of like a bit of a cloth over the top of the table, which I really enjoy them small little details just because it looks so sweet and wholesome, but I couldn't quite get the colours of the table from My Wedding Stories to match the chairs from this new DLC. So yeah, I decided to opt for one that came up from the Jungle Adventure game pack. But then also in the dining room, I placed down some more like china cabinets, and I placed down kind of like a table in between them to make them look like a bit of a built-in feature. I placed down some sort of like, it looks like an old wagon wheel or something on the wall, and then I also just cluttered it up inside the cabinets with like some more plates and just loads of random bits and bobs. But now you can see that I've now moved over into the garage, and this is the room where your Sims can literally make a bottle of wine. Now, I can probably understand that a lot of people are so baffled why I'm so happy and so obsessed and just as excited about nectar making to horses. Trust me, I get it. Like, if I was you, I'd probably be a little bit like, all right, this is not that exciting. But for me, this is honestly groundbreaking, because the amount of times I've done builds, like I said, that I wanted to have like wine cellars, or I've gone along with the storyline of the Sim owns a bar downtown and they make wine in their basement, and previously I've literally just placed down this like wall decoration that we got from, I think it's the Dine Out game pack, and it's basically just a shelving unit that's got loads of different wine bottles, and I always say, oh, it's like where they make their wine, it's where they store their wine. Now we can actually do it, and it brings me so much happiness, it brings me so much joy. But you can see that I've placed down the nectar making station kind of like towards the garage doors, and then behind it we've got all these kind of like modular, almost like shelving units. Now, these also came with the new DLC, and basically your Sims can store wine in these units, so you can basically plop a little bottle in there and then it will physically appear in the shelving unit itself, which I really like, because sometimes in different like areas of the game you might do something and it might change an object, but there's no physical difference to the object itself and you don't really know that there's something in there. Whereas now with this like little nectar shelf thing, you can put a bottle of wine in it and then it physically shows that in the game, which it's a small little detail, but I really like that detail. Also, I have heard through the grapevine, no pun intended actually, that was genuinely a mistake, I didn't actually mean to do that, but I've heard through the grapevine that apparently if you place down these into a basement, it makes the wine age better or faster, which love that. Love the small little details. That's really, honestly, just makes me so happy, and it just makes me just want to bounce off the walls. I'm so obsessed with nectar making in The Sims 4, and I know a lot of people probably don't understand it because it might seem like such a small feature, but for me it was something that I played with pretty much every single day growing up playing The Sims 3 World of Adventures, and I'm just happy that I can basically relive my childhood now in The Sims 4. But also in the garage I placed down like loads of different like decorative barrels, there's loads of different like storage cubbies and like storage boxes. I placed down some extra like hay barrels, which normally the horses would feed from, but I was thinking they were like backup ones. You know, you're not going to have all of the hay barrels outside. You might have like one that maybe comes out every so often, maybe like when one's dirty you kind of like switch them out and replace them. So I put some like spare looking items, if you want to put it that way, into the garage as well. I also placed down a few different bikes, a few different like clothing units. I was thinking that's where they keep all of like their riding gear or something. I also placed one of them down into the kitchen as well, which originally when I placed it down, I was thinking it's a bit weird that you've literally got a wardrobe in your kitchen, because it's literally a wardrobe. Like your Sims can change their clothes, they can do everything that they would do at a normal wardrobe within that little like shelving unit with their clothes hanging off it. But I placed it down to the kitchen, and I was thinking maybe the kitchen can kind of double up to be a little bit of a mud room or something. The clothes that I placed down, by the way, again from the DLC, this is new content, but it's kind of like cowboy outfits. It's just love the small details. But anyway, moving on from that, as you would have seen, I just quickly did the downstairs utility room. So there is a washing machine and a tumble dryer in this house, but then also on the outside there ends up being a wash tub and then also like a laundry line, so your Sims can, you know, wash their clothes in a little wash tub, and then they can hang it out on the line and it can dry in the sunshine, which I just love having that little feature in my builds. I always do it in my personal gameplay as well, just because I prefer personally getting my Sims to hang the washing out on the line rather than just shoving it in the dryer. I don't know if it's just a preference thing, or maybe it's just an English thing. We don't really use dryers in the UK, and so you just always hang it out on the line, or if it's raining, you have one of them little things on the inside. But either way, besides the point, there is a utility room in this house, which means this house does have laundry. If you don't want to play with laundry in your game, you can definitely just replace the washing machine and the tumble dryer, maybe with like a bathtub, and then make it into maybe an extra bathroom. But now, as you can see, I've now moved on to the upstairs portion of the build, and I'm currently going around and just doing the hallway. So in the hallway itself, I placed down a few different like little seating areas by like the staircase. They also end up being like a little toy box. I placed down one from the Parenthood game pack. It's kind of like outside the kids' rooms, because the way that I decorated the bedrooms in this house, there is a room for a set of parents, a room for a kid, and then a room for the infant. And I was thinking the little toy box outside is like the kids' toys, and it's kind of like where they collectively keep all of their stuff and whatnot. But you would have quickly seen as well, I did just do one of the bathrooms. Now, like I mentioned, there is 3 bathrooms in this house. Like always though, I only ever show the furnishing for one, but there is one ensuite of the parents' room, the one that I showed you, which is kind of like the main bathroom, and then there is also a tiny little bathroom downstairs. The bathroom downstairs is pretty much like a half bathroom, because it only has a toilet and a sink in, whereas the other ones have, like the ensuite has a bathtub, and then the main bathroom, which I just showed you, has one of the new fancy showers, which I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know how often I'm going to use the new shower that we got from the DLC, because it is very particular. I will say that. I appreciate it though, because imagine if you've got a Sim that absolutely lives and breathes horses, they can have a shower curtain that's got horses on it, or like horseshoes on it, which I do appreciate it. Don't know how much I'm going to use it, but where I was just trying to showcase everything in this build, I did decide to plop it down into the bathroom. We also did get a new bathtub as well, but I decided not to use the new bathtub, because the new bathtub is completely wooden, and I just didn't feel like it fitted for this house, but I still appreciate it. It's still a really pretty object. But either way, as you can see, I've now moved over and I've started furnishing one of the first bedrooms, which is the infant's room. Ironically, I say that and I'm actually just finished off the room, but in the infant's room, I use one of the new rugs that we got from this new DLC, which is so adorable. I cannot even put it into words. I don't know if you would have caught it, but we've got this new rug and it's got these little sheep on it, and it is just the nicest thing I think I've ever seen for an infant in the game. Ever. It is just so pretty. We don't really have that many like infant looking objects or like infant gameplay objects from this DLC, if any, but we've got a lot of objects that you can tie into infants' rooms, like the rocking chair that I also placed down into their room. I placed down this really pretty painting above the crib, which I did want to mention because I know someone's gonna say about it. But normally when it comes around to furnishing infants' rooms in my Sims builds, I normally like to not put anything near the crib in terms of like wall decorations. Like a wall decal, that's fine, but you know, like a painting above a crib, normally it's a no-go for me, because in real life you cannot have a painting above a crib, because what about if the painting falls off? Do you get what I mean? Like, so in my Sims builds, I never do it. But the thing is, when I was decorating the infant's room, I found this swatch of this painting, which has a horse in it, a sheep and a goat. It was the most perfect painting for the room, because when it came around to decorating the bedrooms, I tried to decorate the infant's room to be like a sheep theme, and then the kids' bedroom to be more like a horse girl kind of theme. But I found this painting and it was so perfect, and like the picture frame just tied into the colour scheme for that room. But the thing is, I wanted you to be able to see it in gameplay, and if I would have placed down that painting on another wall, if you play in like half wall up, half wall down mode, it would have disappeared. And just knowing that you wouldn't have been able to see it in gameplay just kind of, it made me place it down above the crib. If you don't like it and you don't think it's very realistic, which granted it's not very realistic, and please do not do that in real life, it was just such a pretty painting and I really wanted it to be almost like a focus point in that room. So yeah, I placed that down to the wall. But you can see that I've now moved over and I'm currently going in and decorating the horse scale bedroom. So in here I use one of the new beds that we got from the DLC. We got 3 single beds and then 2 double beds. There is a double version of the bed that I've used. I was having a little bit of a hard time trying to figure out which bed swatch to go for and like what kind of like overall colour scheme that I wanted to go for in this room. And so you would have seen, eventually I ended up switching out the wallpapers from the toddler's room and then the kids' room, and kind of like switched around the wallpapers. So then that way there was kind of like a more of a blank canvas, because originally going into the kids' room I had like this bright red wallpaper and I was having a really hard time trying to match the bed duvet covers to it. But you can see that I've now moved over into the last room, which is the parents' bedroom. This bedroom brings me so much happiness, I can't even tell you. The screenshots of this room, some of my favourite screenshots I've taken in such a long time, but I could say that for the whole entire house, and I'm pretty sure I have said that for this entire house, because I'm just so obsessed with every single small little detail in this house and just all the objects, and just they're just so good, like the mesh of them, the quality of them, the colouring of them, it makes me so happy. But in this room I use one of the new beds, and then I also placed down a little ottoman on kind of like the edge of it. I used the ottoman in that leery kind of like Marmite swatch that I use the dining room chairs in downstairs, because I'm just such a big fan of it, and I feel like a lot of people are either going to love this swatch or they're really not going to like this swatch. I just think it is just so cool and unique to this expansion pack. And so yeah, I'm going to see if I can try and figure out how I can place this down as my normal builds. But in this room as well, I end up placing down some get-together wardrobes. Also ends up being like a little TV unit. I put a little like retro TV on the little TV cabinet. That ends up being another little like separate wardrobe with a mirror, and then a bookcase. And that is pretty much it. So anyway guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this voiceover right here. As always, you can download this build via the gallery. My gallery ID is JessicapieYT, or just search for the hashtag JessicapieYT or just the hashtag Jessicapie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, if you do like my content then please do subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next Sims 4 speedbuilding video. Bye guys.